Hello and welcome to the Property News Show, where every week we cover the news from the UK property market as it affects investors and landlords. This week I'm joined by Neville Wright, serial entrepreneur, author and founder of Kiddicare, and as always, Mark Homer, founder of Progressive Group, property investor and host of the Mark My Words podcast. This week we're discussing proposed changes to reduce the level of gazumping and last minute pullouts in the UK property market, and proposed changes to stamp duty that might take place under a Labour government. We finish off with some questions from our community. If you want your question answered on the show, leave a comment below or join us on our Facebook community. You'll find a link in the description. As always, please like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on an episode. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the show. First is a story from The Guardian where we are talking about a plan with several trials set to go across the country to lower or end the gazumping of house sales. Mark, what do you think about this?
I think it's, on the face of it, really good. There is a lot of money wasted in this country through lost legal fees, survey fees, people paying removal companies to take their stuff, and at the last minute, just before exchange, people leave them at the altar and pull out. So that's got to be a good thing. It's just how it's tackled and how they deal with it. I think in Scotland, a lot of some of the legal work and the survey work is done up front and put in a pack, which is quite useful. So they sort of reverse it, because of course, what happens if you find stuff out about the title, or so there may be some other legal issue, or what happens if you find out, I don't know, there's some sort of physical issue with the property that a surveyor uncovers. So apparently what they're talking about doing is people needing to put a deposit down, a smallish deposit, and maybe a few £100, maybe £1,000, and they would lose that if they pull out without a good reason. And apparently the good reason might be not being able to get a mortgage, or some sort of bereavement or loss of a job. I guess there's
a lot of wiggle room on the terminology. Good reason, isn't there?
This is the point. Not being able to get a mortgage, well, you could quite easily engineer that just with the answers that you give to the broker. So they're going to need to think about how how that is controlled quite tightly. And then of course there's sort of legal issues or major survey issues, which would allow them to pull out as well. So the answer may be to do all the work up front, like they do in Scotland, get the vendor to do the work and provide a pack.
If someone asked you to solve this problem, is that what you would do?
I think I probably would do. I think in Australia they do something similar as well.
Neville, what do you think? Like the way we buy houses and property in this country is pretty archaic. It's quite long-winded and complex. You can walk into a car dealership and buy a £200,000 car in cash and walk away with it straight away, but to buy a £80,000 flat might take 3 months.
Yes, it's far too long. They want to simplify the system, and I agree with the thing about gazumping. It's not good, and it's you don't know where you are. You think you bought a house, and then all of a sudden you haven't, because of usually of greed, and the seller has been offered a higher price, and you can't blame them in a way for wanting more. But it's greed. It is, and then there's the fear of loss, and they put a higher bid in. So greed and fear of loss are the two things, and people lose out, and then people have said to me, oh, I was going to move 30 years ago, but I had this problem and it put me off moving for the rest of my life, and it shouldn't do that. It shouldn't hurt people that much.
No, absolutely.
When it gets into commercial stuff, and then you've got your best and final bids, that's a different matter. And then when they say, well, that doesn't mean anything because we're going to do another round and another round until they get the price as high as they can, that's, people understand that because that's the game they're in, but not normal people who's trying to run their life, their family, their job, and on their budget for it to be gazumped. It's dreadful. So and the time it takes is far too long.
So you'd like to see a kind of a modernisation, a formalisation of like the house buying process?
Yes.
Make it a bit easier for everybody?
Yes, much easier.
Okay. So it looks like they're going to be doing several versions of this in trials across the UK as early as next year. So we might see some results from that, which will be interesting.
It'd be amazing if they do anything at the moment. I mean, I don't know if you saw in the Queen's speech, very little got proposed in terms of property, and they were talking about repealing the Section 21 and making it harder to evict residential tenants. None of that was in there. So I suspect Brexit is top of the agenda, and until the withdrawal agreement is at least agreed, then we're not going to see much at all.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing the full manifestos from both parties. Now we've held the GE on the table. We're hoping
it will be interesting.
We're hoping to do a full breakdown episode of that in the next few weeks once we've got their manifestos.
Are they going to stick to those manifestos?
Who knows? We can only go with what they say. So on that very touchy subject of politics, the second story we have today is from the Telegraph, and it's a story of some potential proposed stamp duty changes under a Labour and CORBYN government. These include scrapping stamp duty altogether on people buying homes for them to live in, and then offsetting that loss to the Treasury with potentially increased taxes and levies on investors and people buying multiple or second homes. Mark, do you think that's a completely bad thing for the market?
Well, the market is gummed up at the moment. I mean, not so much, below £1 million, because stamp duty has decreased in the last few years, but certainly above that level. Obviously, there are a lot less properties that the market really isn't moving, especially over 1.5 million. And the other thing is, if you're a first-time buyer, it's sort of you've got sort of 300,000 to 500,000. Anything up to that, you don't pay any stamp duty already. Obviously it'll be good for the market. I suspect if they reduce stamp duty rates, they may end up taking more stamp duty as well. I know that sounds a little bit sort of inverse in its thought process, but since they last changed, since Osborne and Cameron changed the stamp duty threshold, stamp duty take has actually reduced just because there are less transactions going on. So it's probably a good thing at the lower end of the market. Increasing stamp duty for investors and second homeowners, well, I'm bound to say it's bad for the rental market. There are reduced numbers of residential landlords now, and more are exiting the market, so rents have been going up, and clearly we've seen rents, go up about 25% in even the last 2 or 3 years, and that is off the back of this. So if they put it up more, then they'll have even less rental property and rents will go up more. Second homeowners, well, I'm probably not as bothered. Clearly I don't have a vested interest, but I wouldn't have thought it's good for their tax take.
No.
But of course, Corbyn's probably not interested in that. He's probably just interested in votes.
Neville, what do you think?
Well, I think Mark said it all, but I don't think it's a good idea because it's hurting the people who can't buy the house, and because if they're taking the tax off one person and putting it on another, as Mark said, they're going to put it onto people who are investing in property, and then they're going to pass that on to people who are renting. And these people who are renting, if their rents keep going up and up, they'll never be able to afford to buy a house. So the people they're doing it for are not going to be able to do it. So it's
the tax doesn't
wrong.
disappear; it just goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you end up maybe with the people it was intended to benefit, paying it in the end anyway.
Yeah, the people they think it's going to help is going to be very few to compare to the ones that are going to be penalised from it.
This is it, and therein lies an important point. They've got really clever economists and people that work all this stuff out. They know that this is likely to. They have to know that this is likely to result in increased rents. They have to know that this is likely to, be passed on to tenants, and they're going to end up paying for it. Because there must be internal. They must be being advised that that's. the case, and it's just clear to me the way they've been acting over these sort of extra taxes the last few years is they don't care that the tenants are having to pay more.
I agree.
They're just going for votes, so they don't care, do they?
No, I think they're just trying to keep the majority of people down in their place.
Do you think?
I do.
Could be that.
Could be. It's like putting the minimum wage up to £10 in the next 5 years. It's bringing some hope to people, but it's just keeping them down, keeping them in sometimes a menial job because they think they're going to get a little bit more, but they've just got a ceiling, and they're not. It's not right. The whole of the government, I feel, is trying to keep the general population down, so they have to do as they're told, and
it's
they can't think for themselves.
Minor change that dresses it a little bit one way or the other. But
stay on PAYE and pay more income tax and national insurance, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. It's great. It just the whole thing just seems counterintuitive and doesn't seem to make any sense. And ideas like what Neville's just come out with, you have to start thinking that it's something like that, or going for votes or whatever. They're not helping these people. So what's the logical explanation? It just seems bonkers, the whole thing.
Okay. Politics, you could talk for a long time about that. It's a different video.
There's something I just thought about. I've said in my book, right from the 70s, there's no benefits to the benefit system. They're keeping you just above water to eat. That's it. But they're not doing anything for you. So the benefit system, the whole of the economy, the benefit system is to keep people down, not to bring them up.
Yeah,
not to improve their circumstances.
On a slight tangent, I read a really interesting thing because people often assume a basic pay increase, minimum wage increase is always a positive thing.
Yeah.
But I read a interview with the European CEO of McDonald's, and he said it reaches a point where it just becomes cheaper for him to use kiosks and use machines when people become too expensive, and that kiosk never takes a day off, that kiosk is never sick, and actually an ever increasing minimum wage does reach a threshold that's actually bad for people, because then you're too expensive compared to automation.
It's like in the 70s, the unions come in, they had higher wages, there was general strikes and stuff like this going on, and what happened? They shot themselves in the foot. They put the manufacturing over to China and places like that, and there was more people unemployed.
And that's the inevitable consequence. And national insurance, pensions have been going up and up, so employers have been paying more of this stuff. So, the temptation is to reduce the headcount. And I think that's what's been happening in some industries. Obviously, unemployment's still low. But that is the inevitable consequence. Yeah.
Okay, so these are questions from our community, our progressive community. So, at which point should you employ or outsource to a property manager as you grow a portfolio?
When you're pissed off. The thing is, we do both at the moment, and I think we always will. What I would say is the development potential properties, which are obviously not very good because they'll be knocked down and redeveloped, we look after them because there's so many problems. The new developments that we do, whether it's residential or commercial, we give to agents because they're easy for the agents, and there's no problem. We just get the money in less their commission, and that's fine. But the ones that do have a lot of problems, we like to look after ourselves. Now I say look after ourselves, but we've got a place with 40 commercial tenants. It's run down. We're going to knock it down and rebuild for the tenants shortly, but we have an agent there, and so I deal with the agent on a day-to-day basis to help that. So in the early days, we got up to 50 properties we used to manage ourselves because the
Commercial.
agent, no, residential,
Yeah.
because the agents in those days, there wasn't hardly any of them and they didn't know what they were doing. But
Yeah.
now that's a different matter. So it depends on if it's bothering you. If it bothers you and you can't stand it, then get an agent. If it's easy and it ticks along, some people have 2 or 3 tenants, that's fine. So it's really, as I say, when there's a tipping point,
Okay.
then that's when you do it.
Would you answer that any differently, Mark?
Well, for me, I don't like managing properties. So, from one property, residential, I always just give them to agents. And obviously, in the end, I mean, we were using external agents, but then we brought it in-house, and obviously they're managed by staff. But for me, that's like giving it to an agent because I don't like managing residential tenants.
You had an early tipping point.
Yeah, it was the first one, and I knew I didn't want to do it. I've tried since, and I'm not good with tenants. Neville just mentioned a threshold of 50. That's absolutely the threshold that I use for working out whether you should hire someone or if you've got a letting agency. Generally, every 50 to 75 properties you have, you would then generally employ another person.
Okay.
So if you got it all in-house and you've got 50 properties, you can usually take someone on and take the properties back from the letting agent and have them manage it all day.
That's quite a good rule of thumb then.
Yeah,
So,
about
once
50,
you reach
70.
about 50, you're
Yeah.
at a point where it's worth hiring your own person.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then another 50, another person.
Yeah, and well, obviously as you get more, then
Yeah.
you get economies of scale and it's 75 or 100 or whatever for every person, yeah.
Okay, great. So we have another question here, which you lead with, Mark.
Yeah.
So, as a landlord, what responsibilities do you have in regards to asbestos?
Well-
Your favourite subject at the moment.
Well, I mean, clearly, you know, if you've got, if you go on the HSE website, this is all laid out very clearly, and there is criminal responsibility for asbestos. Generally, buildings of this age, the one we're in, you won't have any asbestos. You're more talking about buildings which are sort of 60s, 70s, 80s maybe, you might be able to help me with that, Neville. 90s will usually be fine. If you're just going to run it and you're not doing any development and the asbestos doesn't get disturbed, broken, doesn't go into the air, then you haven't generally got an issue. If you're going to develop it and you're needing to drill into or remove asbestos or whatever, you need to get a licensed contractor in to remove it, and it costs loads of money. They've got to come in suits and rebreathers, and they've got to, we've had it where they've created these little rooms in sort of plastic, with plastic walls and all that sort of stuff to remove it all, and it can just go on and on and on. So really, you've just got to get an asbestos survey. Do not get one, get 4. And because generally the ones doing the surveys are the ones that are going to remove it.
Have a vested interest.
Oh my God! I mean, we've had a recent one where we had quotes between 100 grand and 300 grand to remove it, and then when it was removed, then another lot came in to start some works, and they said, "Oh, it hasn't all been removed," and they got their guy in to decontaminate, and he gave a quote for 180,000. And then we got the other asbestos contractor back in to do an air test, and he said, no, it's all clear, it's fine, and here's the air test, and that report's going to cost 2,000 instead of 180. So for me, this is like the Wild West. These guys are clearly, they're selling on fear, lots of them, because, it is a criminal matter if you don't remove it properly. But as long as you get a licensed asbestos contractor in to do a proper report, and they remove it, then you've done what you need to. But don't get one. Get multiple quotes in, and don't let them collude.
The people telling you how big the problem are the people
that's the
you
problem.
have to pay to solve the problem.
That's the
So
problem.
it's always going to be as big as it can possibly be.
Yeah. Have you had issues with asbestos,
Yes,
Neville?
we've had asbestos for years and years and years, and it's getting better. But it says about responsibilities. I am responsible for any asbestos that's on my premises, and I hear people going, well, it's not my responsibility because there's a tenant in there. No, you are responsible.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, you need to sort it out. And I'm just doing £60,000 worth as we speak of, that's what it's costing to get rid of some asbestos. And it's on a monthly basis that we tend to get these properties, and that's part of the job. And that's just it. And you've got to abide by the rules. And if people, you find dumped asbestos all over the place, and lorry loads of it. And we go onto a new site. I bought a new site last year, and it was all overgrown, lorry loads of asbestos, been tipped while the site was vacant.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
People coming in, tipping.
So, but it's my responsibility to clean it up, and that's it. And it doesn't, you can shout and scream and do whatever you like, but you've got to do it properly.
There are some benefits for removing it. You can claim land remediation relief at 150% of the cost of removal, which goes against your corporation tax.
Okay.
So you're basically getting a 50% sort of uplift, which can be offset against your corporation tax, which is it's worth having. Lots of people don't claim that, but it's an important one. But yeah, Neville's right. It's got to be removed, and you've got to get someone licensed in to do it. Because you do see it all the time where they just dump it, and there are lots of people over the years who got very ill, including a lady that works for me. Her father has an issue with half of his lung, and they think it's asbestos induced. Obviously it's long-term exposure, but it is dangerous.
So it's a serious problem that requires proper solutions.
Yeah,
no
but
half
don't get
measures
one
there.
quote. Yeah.
And make sure you get multiple quotes.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell everyone at home where they can find and follow you. Mark, if you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm on www.progressiveproperty.co.uk. Mark My Words, which is my podcast, and I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, all the usual social media channels.
Okay, great.
At nevillewright.com. The book is on Amazon.
What's your book?
The answer is yes. Now, what is the question? And there's two reasons I want people to buy it, because it'll help them tremendously through the business years, because it helped me through 40 odd years. And it's a base to go to the next stage in my life, and also all the money goes to charity, which is
fantastic.
A win-win situation.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thanks very much for being here, guys. For everyone at home, thank you for watching. Everything we've discussed, you're going to see links in the description, links on where to follow. Mark and Neville are going to be in there as well. Leave a comment if you have anything you want to add to what we've discussed, or if you have any questions, topics you want us to talk about next time. We'll love hearing what you have to say. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.